I really don't want to be the one delivering this, but I got to tell you, this is really hard to believe. It feels like she's lying straight out. Andrea Mitchell, is she lying?
I can't say that. I mean, I would let the viewer, I would let the voter make those determinations, but it doesn't hold up. There's so many inconsistencies, including their response yesterday, and as Chuck said, it was sort of jaw-dropping that they tried, instead of coming out and saying, look, you know, it was a mistake, as she has previously acknowledged, it was bad judgment, and we don't know whether or not it was hacked. We know that there were attempts to penetrate. There's no evidence in this report that that penetration, that actually happened, but you can't, you know, prove the negative. But they should have just come out, arguably, and said, this is a mess and we're going to try to move on. Instead, they're fighting it and coming out with a completely non-credible argument on her behalf. And it also makes her defensive, and it makes her run from reporters and not want to do interviews and not want to talk to, you know, people covering her events all day yesterday. So she's hunkered down now at a key point here. Yes, she's going to get the delegates, but the point is she wanted to win California. She wanted to end on a high. And Bernie Sanders is giving her a huge challenge out here, I can tell you, from just looking at the campaigning this week.
Chuck, to that point that Andrea just raised about reporters asking her questions, one of the more damning components of the Inspector General's report is when he declares in the report that Secretary Clinton declined the opportunity in a request to be interviewed when Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, everybody else, John Kerry, they all were interviewed. What do you figure, given the spin they put on this that's out today, they didn't address the decline in the interview. What do they do now? How do they respond?
Look, their is to never give an inch, right? Which is the Clinton playbook going back to 1992, and it's worked for them in the past, right? They just grind their way through it. But I always have looked at this at sort of what is the Occam's razor, what's the most logical sort of explanation? And the most logical explanation is she wanted to make it harder for the press and Congress to see her correspondence. So they made FOIA requests more difficult by doing what? Making sure it wasn't on a government server, putting it on a private server. And that's the part of this. The idea of convenience, I've never been able to accept that, because what's convenient about having a server in your house? I hate dealing with Wi-Fi at my house, okay? It's a pain in the... No. I'm like, why don't I have an IT guy at home?
Chuck, it's not something you forgot you did.
Yes.
It's not something someone did or your husband set up for you and you forgot you did when you're Secretary of State.
And
Come on,
what a terrible
everybody.
Look. You know, like so many of these Clinton scandals, it's impossible to imagine that this wasn't going to surface.
Andrea, last word.
And, yeah, just one quick point. We now see new emails never turned over, never before revealed, that the IG found. What's that all about? And one of them has her writing to Huma Abedin that she doesn't, you know, that she'll go with a state.gov or another private device after one of the attempts, after spamming and things were not being received. This was early on. But she said, we want to make sure that the personal is not accessible, which is exactly to the point that Chuck was just making.
NBC's Andrea Mitchell, thank you. Chuck Todd, thank you as well. Josh Green, stay with us.